Welcome, everybody. So glad to see all of you joining again, literally from all over the nation. I see someone out of Kansas City and Tampa. And by the way, sending our hearts, our love, our good wishes to everybody who's been affected by these recent storms. That's been all over Florida, of course, but especially with Helene in the Southeast. Our hearts are with you. And I'm glad if you're driving, it means you've got power and you're back in business. So welcome and glad you're here. I am the executive director of the Survive and Thrive Advocacy Center, or STAC. We're an agency, a nonprofit agency, turning 10 next year. I cannot believe it. Turning 10, and we've done work in the 6-county area here in the Big Bend of Florida, assisting trafficking survivors and people at risk, and working with the community. And by that, I mean people who are sex or labor trafficked, all ages, all immigration status, regardless of faith or gender or anything. So we are working with everyone. We only do this care management with the help of many partners throughout the state and the nation, as you will see today. We also are making sure everyone is aware of the many places where trafficking happens, especially in our rural areas. And that has been some of the most rewarding work lately, is to really do outreach and connect to our partners in our surrounding rural areas. We do tons of community education, and there's a slide I often have on that has a picture of a big eyeball, and it says, your eye cannot see what your brain doesn't know. So that's why we really feel that helping survivors, working with survivors, standing with, empowering survivors cannot happen unless the community is educated and aware. So that's why we really make a difference, I hope. And really, since our inception, we're doing all these statistics now. I think we've helped over or trained over 18,000 people, if you can believe it. You all today are part of the outreach we do over the web, but it is just an ongoing quest, and has been extremely important and rewarding. Next slide, please. Also know that we want all of this to be in your hands as much as possible, all the knowledge and all the information. We've taken a lot of time to build a website that's truly rich with not just all of these webinars. So those of you who might attend today and might want to say, hey, I really would love to share this information with my colleagues or at my next coordinating council meeting. All of them are on our website. All these webinars, we record them and we post them on our webinar at surviveandthriveadvocacy.org. We've got toolkits for service providers. We've got a toolkit for youth and caregivers who can understand more about trafficking and the special vulnerabilities that youth are facing. All of our stuff is free of charge. We don't charge for it. We want people to have access no matter what. And we also do these events the same way. We want them to be free. We want to keep them that way. And that's why when we work, we really hope you'll love it so much you'll go to our website and consider supporting our work with a donation. And I've got a slide for that in a minute. But we do offer all of our services free. Next slide, please. One of the things we have is a podcast. And if you attended last month, you heard Holly Nadell. And Holly was talking about financial empowerment for survivors and all the laws and the practices and the procedures and the programs that are out there to help survivors to become economically secure. Holly was our last guest. We only talk with survivors to give them the chance, a voice, a platform to amplify their experiences and their suggestions for us. So this is not to go through the worst things that ever happened to somebody. It's really to learn from them about how we can be better and smarter going forward. So I really encourage you, if you're a podcast person, I confess I am always listening to many podcasts, you can enjoy that. Here's another QR code. If you are motivated, if you do get something from today, I really encourage you to join us. You can do that by scanning this QR code, and we hope you will, because All of you who work for nonprofits or government or anybody know it's tough out there. And really, we only can do it with your support. Next slide, please. And this is to introduce now our wonderful presenters today. So Diego is, I want to say, you're our returning champion. You have been here at least one time, I think one time, and have really, when you presented the last time, by the way, I'll just start out and talk about Diego Luque. Your title is you're with the Center for Countering Human Trafficking, and I know you're going to talk to us more about that. And your title is Partnership and Engagement Specialist at the U.S. Department of Homeland Security. And Diego, I'm so grateful to you for helping us to organize this again. We know that you are here and you go all over the country. One of the things I love about what you've done and do is you do center the voices of survivors in your work. It looks like you, as we put in your bio on our website, you've been doing this for over 3 years and over 100 trainings, multiple public-private sector, formerly with the Department of State and the Bureau of Consular Affairs. And I have to say, you and Special Agent Dunnigan also have roots into Florida, where you were a proud graduate of FIU in Miami. So like to have you back as a former Florida resident here with us today. Special Agent Dunnigan, Clancy Dunnigan, great to be meeting you, and thank you also for being part of our program today, also with roots in Florida, having started his career in 2008 with ICE, now HSI, in Miami. So worked many cases. I know he's going to talk to you about law enforcement related matters. You've been working from the Carolinas into New York, multiple successful prosecutions with many traffickers in prisons. I'm glad to see that, of course. You're now in Indianapolis, where you are serving as a subject matter expert for the state and still conducting investigations, including, by the way, this was very interesting for me to see human trafficking schemes from underage prostitution to a transnational religious cult. And we do get calls from time to time about cults. So really grateful to know you're gonna you have that experience and can talk to us about that. Now, I want to welcome you all and let everybody know that we've got 2 great experts today ready to talk about this issue. And I am getting a little bit of background noise, maybe from you, Diego. Is there like something worrying, not worrying? There's gone. Okay.
It's probably my old laptop, the
Oh,
engine.
there it
Sorry
is.
about that.
Your laptop is showing its age. Okay, that's okay. We can still hear you great. And welcome everybody. I would like to turn it over to you now if you'd like to bring your slides up and invite both Diego and Clancy. May I call you both by your first names? I didn't ask you that before during
Yes,
the
ma'am.
yes. That I want to turn it over to you. Everybody, you've got the Q&A for your questions. Please chat in. These gentlemen have agreed that if you've got questions during, we can try to answer them. And we will also save 10 minutes at the end. So we'll take lots of questions at the end then as well. So Clancy, Diego, it's all yours now. And thank you again for being here.
All right. Thank you so much, Robin, Survive and Thrive Advocacy Center, and all the different parties that are making this possible today. Yes, this is my second time talking to you all. So thanks once again for just having us, being able to share more about what Blue Campaign, the Center for Countering Human Trafficking, and my different colleagues at HSI, CCHT are doing. It's very important, I think, that we have information and resources that everybody could benefit from, not only to try to prevent this crime of human trafficking, but also to raise awareness. So, I'll let Clancy, introduce himself. He's going to be going over a little bit more about CCHT and what Continued Presence is doing. while I more so will focus on Blue campaign updates and share some new resources that we have here with you. All right. Hey, can I get a thumbs up, Clancy? Can you see the presentation on the screen?
I can see the DHS Blue campaign and CCHT slide.
All right, we're good. That is what I want people to see. All right, let's go ahead and get started here. Thank you, Robin, for those introductions that you did of us. Much appreciated. Saves us some time. But yeah, I first want to start out. There's going to be some people that don't really know who Blue Campaign is. You might have missed our first time around when we did this presentation. But yeah, just kind of want to start out with who we are. We're a national public awareness campaign aimed at providing awareness materials and awareness trainings to the general public, different industries, law enforcement, community organizations. The list goes on and on. We have a huge presence in Florida, whether it's in some casinos, I always bring this one up because I'm from Fort Lauderdale, and every time I walk into Fort Lauderdale, work never leaves me because I see a Blue campaign poster in the stalls, in the hallways. I hear our audio PSAs. So we are in a lot of different industries, whether it's aviation, transportation, hospitality, casinos. We do have some sort of foot in these industries in order to bring them information on what is human trafficking, how can they identify this crime, and how to be able to report it. So we're really focusing on that education piece here on the Blue campaign. Everything we do goes through the eyes of subject matter experts, whether it's experts such as Mr. Clancy, a special agent, whether it's a victim assistance specialist, forensic interviewer, whether it's a survivor of human trafficking, which the Blue campaign utilizes an entire network of lived experience experts that directly consult the campaign, whether they are assisting us with document review or going on videos to talk about indicators that may have been missed. One of those videos I will be showing today to kind of give you an idea of how we're adding context to our general awareness presentations and trainings here on the Blue campaign. So all that to say, we don't do anything in a vacuum here at the Blue campaign. Number 3, partnerships. So Blue campaign is one of the only offices in Homeland Security. There are a couple others, but we're one of the bigger ones that could actually partner with organizations, industries, airports, and a variety of different sort of community organizations. We're allowed to partner with these organizations in order to really maximize the reach of our information, of our resources. On the Blue campaign, we are made up of 6 individuals, all based out of Washington, D.C. So we really cannot do this sort of work alone. This requires an all sort of hands-on-deck approach, both from public and private sector. So we are able to partner with these different organizations to co-brand materials, to share subject matter experts, to attend events, to attend conferences, to host conferences and events together. So that partnership opportunity is very important because once we're able to train one of these partners, then they can continue spreading that information within their community, within their workforce, within their volunteer workforce even. And lastly, 2 foundational elements here on the Blue campaign. So myself, I am on the prevention team. So what are we trying to do? We're trying to prevent the crime from happening. So number 1 way to do that is education, is educating people on how to be able to prevent this crime. And that starts with really knowing what this crime is. There are still a lot of misconceptions about what human trafficking is. There's still a lot of just flat out conspiracies about what this crime is. So under prevention, we're really trying to educate those groups that might be working or that might be themselves considered vulnerable populations. So under prevention, we're working a lot with adults that are working with young people, whether it's social workers, teachers, volunteers, even sports coaches. We reach them because we know that they are working one-on-one with children in a variety of different capacities, and we have entire resources for how to talk to a young person about human trafficking. Under prevention, we're also working a lot with tribal nations, and that also includes tribal casinos. We're working with houses of worship of all denominations, and community organizations, people that are boots on the ground that are talking every day to members of their community. We want to be able to reach you because we understand that you are already known in the community. We know that you communicate with people in the community. So you are people that we want to be able to reach under prevention. Now, under protection, that's the name says it itself. How can we protect victims? How can we better do our job and help victims that are in a position that they need help? So under protection, we're working a lot with law enforcement, different industries that might already be coming into contact with a potential victim. So we could assume that if a person working the front desk at a hotel is encountering somebody that might be a victim of human trafficking, or that something is going on, we could assume that it's no longer prevention at that time, that victimization might have already happened. So under that sort of portfolio, now how can we get that victim out of that situation using something called a victim-centered approach based on those trauma-informed principles? So our protection department is really focused in on being able to give these trainings on victim-centered approach based on those trauma-informed principles to protect people that are being exploited. That is the Blue Campaign in a nutshell. And now CCHT. So the CCHT, Center for Countering Human Trafficking, abbreviations are everywhere in the federal government, and I'm sure that they're everywhere in the state government as well. But yes, CCHT. So the Blue Campaign was recently integrated into the Center for Countering Human Trafficking about 2 years ago. So this center was formed in 2019, and it is made up of all 16 different departments, offices, agencies within Homeland Security. So every office is within this center, whether it's CBP or U.S.C, ICE, even Coast Guard, TSA. Everybody here has a role in the center. And this is really a way where we're able to communicate with one another, share resources, coordinate. You know, some of my colleagues even assist different agencies and offices in their investigations. We have a variety of different units here at the center. We have a labor trafficking unit. We have a sex trafficking investigations unit. We have a victim protection unit. And then we have an entire unit just called strategic education. So everybody on that strategic education team is really just out there just raising awareness of what this crime is. We're at different conferences, trainings. So this center is really starting to take, hold. We have over 80 permanent staff members on this. We're also rotating from different offices. They volunteer their time with the center on something called TDYs, so rotationals. So this center is really just beginning to really stock up with staff members. And yeah, I will let Clancy touch a little bit more on that as well. But yes, so CCHT, why did this get brought up? Well, since the Blue Campaign has been inside of the Center for Countering Human Trafficking, we've seen a lot of different unique ways that we could work together with different offices. Ways that when we were a part of, regular headquarters, so Blue Campaign used to be part of Office of Partnerships and Engagement, some of the communication was really not there with different offices. We didn't really hear about what really we need to be doing as a campaign as far as creating resources in these different sort of kind of niche audiences or niche sort of settings. So here's an example of our most recent sort of collaborations that we've done. So through conversations with colleagues at CBP within the center, we identified that the maritime industry needs more resources or more information in order to combat human trafficking that's happening within the ports, whether it's importing goods that are used with forced labor on the production chain, whether it's stopping those sort of goods, or whether it's actually stopping victims that are being transported through the maritime industry. So very recently, we worked on this maritime port kind of poster awareness series. I haven't had a day off in months, and I was promised payment. So we've translated these different posters into Burmese, simplified Chinese, and Tagalog, and of course, English, in order to be able to target all the different major ports. Hopefully, we're at Everglades Port in Fort Lauderdale very soon, but this is one of our newer series. And really, without that sort of coordination and communication with our CBP colleagues at the center, this material is something that probably Blue Campaign wouldn't have been able to create because we just weren't aware. We're not in investigations. We are not law enforcement at Blue Campaign. So we really rely on our subject matter experts to inform the campaign. Like I said in the beginning, we don't do anything in a vacuum, and we really rely on these subject matter experts. And also, and this might be useful to a lot of people here, we've actually have translated our victim awareness sort of posters for victims that might not have a legal standing. So we've kind of made this sort of tool for U.S.CIS that could share information about what is the T visa, what is VAWA, what is visa U, what is the U visa, what is asylum. So we've translated this document now into 12 different languages, and you will see me very flustered because I can't remember all of the languages, but some of them are Russian, Haitian Creole, Spanish, simplified Chinese, a whole lot of others. But yeah, you know, we talked with our colleagues at U.S.CIS that are at the center, and they identified that, hey, this should be translated into pretty much all the languages because this is a very useful resource. And we were able to translate them using Blue Campaign translators. And yeah, so these are just kind of those unique examples of how being in a center and being able to coordinate, communicate with one another really is supporting overall efforts to combat human trafficking and get victims the support they need. Another very neat thing, and you know what, this is going to be an open invitation to everybody here. So as soon as we got integrated to the center, we were thinking of what are some unique things, events, conferences that we could create, not only with the center, but with Blue Campaign. Blue Campaign is known for events, for engagements, for being the public awareness arm of Homeland Security when it comes to human trafficking information. So we created a symposium. This past January, during Human Trafficking Prevention Month, the Blue Campaign hosted their first 2-day anti-trafficking symposium with over 330 in-person attendees, with over 16 breakout rooms where we brought in subject matter experts from pretty much throughout the country to talk about investigations. We even had panels with survivors and the investigating officer that was a part of their case. We did workshops on vicarious trauma and how to take care of yourself. We did panels including all the major industries, whether it was Boeing or American Airlines, JetBlue, in different panels. We are once again going to be doing this symposium this coming January. It's going to be around mid-January, and we would love for you to be there. This is going to be an in-person engagement, a 2-day conference in Washington, D.C. You might correct me. It's not going to be in Washington, D.C., but it's in Arlington. And I promise it's a stone's throw to Washington, D.C. It's right across the river. All right. And yeah, this is going to be open to the public. It is, well, open to the public, kind of, you know, we still want to make sure that the people that are attending are the people that are going to most benefit from this sort of information. It's free to attend, and I'll be more than happy to share that invitation with this group and with Rob and the organizations that are present here to see if you can make it out. We would love to have you there. It's going to be action-packed 2 days of just knowledge, all on the topic of anti-human trafficking and different efforts that people are doing to really stop this crime and get victims help.
And that's
and yeah, those are just some of, yes, Robin.
Yeah, let me jump in for a sec and say, we'll put that on our website as well if you want us to, on our event page, Diego. Somebody just said, please send the link. We definitely want to do this. And this is just fantastic. So the other thing, I love the new campaign, by the way. I'm excited, so I'll just tell you that. But how can we get copies of that? Are they free? Like, how does that work?
Yeah, so the posters, we are going to be working on those to make them in print version. Right now, we are finalizing something we call a 508 compliance in the virtual form, which are going to be available on our website very, very soon. Hopefully within the next 2 to 3 weeks, we got that on our website. And then we were going to talk about how can we mass print these. But I will share more information as soon as we print them. But on website, they should be available within 2 to 3 weeks.
Thank you.
Of course. Yes. So 2025 symposium is going to be great. It's going to be huge. I can't wait to see a lot of you there. And please feel free, to reach out. We're also going to have exhibit table opportunities. If your organization is interested in exhibiting, that those opportunities will also be there. All right. So I wanted to provide a couple more updates about what Blue Campaign is doing to raise awareness. I know I've done this presentation in the past and I've gone over a lot of different resources we have. So I really wanted to focus in on resources that have been recently created and also resources that we might be using in some of our awareness trainings. A big part of Blue Campaign is doing human trafficking awareness and prevention trainings to a variety of different groups. So I'm going to show you one of those videos that we're using to really add context, because hearing videos from lived experience experts really just adds that certain element to a training, because hearing it from somebody that has gone through this crime, that has, seeing the indicators that people were missing in their case is important to hear from. So I will also be sharing one of those videos today. So if you weren't aware, Blue Campaign is doing this year round. We are the awareness sort of campaign on this subject of anti-human trafficking. We're at conferences, trainings, exhibitor booths. We're doing webinars like the one today, social media events. So this is year round. There is no charge to, get a speaker from the Blue Campaign to attend one of your conferences. If you have a proposal window for us to submit a speaking proposal at your conference or at your event, please let us know. We want to be able to bring this information to you all. And those are just some examples of the different events we've done. One is a tribal casino training. One of my favorite conferences to attend and talk at is the Big Brothers Big Sisters conference, where, of course, we're talking to all these volunteers that have littles, and we're bringing them information on how to bring up child exploitation or human trafficking with their little or group that they're working with. Some other little quick snapshots of that. All right. So some neat things that we are really doing on the campaign, and I get excited. I'm a big football guy. We're really getting started with the season. I'm sorry for everyone in Florida. I know Dolphins and Jaguars aren't doing the best right now, but hey, Tampa's going strong, so something to be happy about, Florida sports. But yes, during Super Bowl, we have started this huge campaign around Super Bowl and really a lot of different big events, whether it's targeting people that are attending online. So when they're scrolling Instagram or where they're scrolling TikTok, we've been targeting these people with these sort of information on, hey, human trafficking is happening in this community, but together we could stop it. So we had a huge advertisement campaign in this past Super Bowl that even included out-of-home placements like doormats and door hangers on different hotel rooms. Those are different examples, no room for trafficking here. We were able to partner so that partnership aspect comes back again. We were able to bring in our partners from different hotel chains, Holiday Inn, Marriott, the Hilton, and really target all these hotels and bring this Blue Campaign human trafficking prevention information right to their door. Those are different examples. We were able to partner with, I believe it was Lyft. We were able to partner with Lyft as well to give their drivers training, so learning management system on what is human trafficking, in order for them to also be aware of what's happening around them and possibly stop a human trafficking situation from happening. So we were able to train drivers. They received text messages on February 7th and 8th, so days leading up to the Super Bowl. And then they were able to respond with a prompt such as, how can I help? And that's when we were able to give a lot of different information. And of course, we plastered all sorts of different this kind of messaging, how to tackle human trafficking throughout different advertisement spaces in that area. So huge campaign, as well as in March Madness. I still get messages from people telling me like, hey, I saw this while I was attending one of these, basketball games and interested, just want to hear about it. So that's really what this campaign's supposed to be doing, is making people aware, like, oh, why am I seeing something related to human trafficking awareness? Why am I seeing this when I'm trying to watch UConn play Duke? Well, hey, that is good that people are asking. That is the whole role of the Blue Campaign, is to raise awareness that this is a crime that is happening. So during March Madness, we were able to target different stations, radio stations, TV stations with live TV advertisements. And those are just some of those kind of messaging, has the purpose. We wanted to deliver educational messages to basketball fans and drive that awareness during these major events. And hey, if you are looking to train people coming up, we have a huge event in 2026 coming up that we're already talking about the planning and the organizing and the education that people are going to need. The World Cup. That is probably going to be one of the bigger events that the United States is going to have within the next 10 years, this huge World Cup initiative. And this is going to take an all hands on deck approach to really be able to train, spread information, prepare people for what's to come and what are some of those crimes that could be happening when such big amounts of people are meeting for an event. So more than happy to have conversations on how we could work together, collaborate with the World Cup coming up. Because I think, yes, Miami is going to have one of those stadiums where they're going to have matches. So, hey, that is Florida, and that is an area where we have where we need to do more work in Miami. Tribal communities. We have a huge presence now within tribal nations, tribal communities, and tribal casinos. So one big update here is that we are partnering with Native national helplines, with Native organizations in order to bring information to tribal communities that might have not heard about what human trafficking is. So this campaign has focused on really, number one is being able to bring culturally and be culturally relevant, be culturally sensitive. That is the word, sensitive, that we can't just put any sort of poster or any sort of awareness information in tribal nation. We need to put things that people are going to be able to relate to, that looks like them, that we're bringing culturally relevant artifacts into different into these different awareness materials. All right. So yes, I will share a little bit more about tribal nations because we had an entire project based on that. But now I want to bring up some of the new videos that we're using in our trainings. So very recently, we created a 12-part lived experience expert stories. So it's different survivors of human trafficking talking about their situation, talking about indicators that were missed in their case. And this really helps us bring that context to our trainings, but also allows, viewers to really hear about what were indicators that were missed. So this goes hand in hand when we're doing trainings on different indicators that might be present. Well, then we use these videos where they could talk about those indicators and add that context that is needed to really be able to understand human trafficking, victimization, and indicators. All right, I'm going to go ahead and start sharing this video.
My name is Suleiman, and I'm a subject matter expert on labor trafficking and male victimization. From the start of the TVPA, the Trafficking Victims Protection Act, much of the attention has been primarily on finding ways to combat sex trafficking. I think where we are now in this anti-trafficking movement is that we do have a strong understanding of what sex trafficking looks like. But not enough attention is being done to create separate awareness on what labor trafficking is constituted as. When we're talking about labor trafficking, we're talking about a work environment where an individual feels that they are unable to leave their trafficking situation, and that the goods that they produce, the services that they provide to consumers, a corporation, a conglomerate, or an individual is profiting off of that labor at the expense of that individual. A trafficker will see an individual not for who they are, who their family is, where they come from, what their socioeconomic status is. They only see this individual as a number that can produce a certain amount of goods or a certain amount of revenue where that trafficker can profit off of. In order to accomplish this, a trafficker uses the American dream as their vehicle to portray the opportunity that that worker is going to receive. The trafficker will sell this idea to a worker and simply state that without their help, there is no way this individual is going to be able to get financial security for themselves or financial security for their families. They are making themselves out to be the only person that they can trust here in the United States. They're the only person that they can trust in this community. That's where the isolation and the grooming has already started, before that individual even signs the paper or signs some form acknowledging their employment. What is not discussed is the type of work environment that they actually are a part of. The environments that exist among forced labor have so many different complexities. They range based off of the types of industries that are affected. When we think about construction sites, for example, forced labor may be as simple as having an individual work more than they were allotted to work that day, where they were underpaid or they were not paid whatsoever based off of the false promises their trafficker gave. The American reality that many of these workers face is the reality that they do not have access to personal protective equipment. They do not have access to overtime. They do not have access to an equitable wage that is in compliance with state and federal laws. The American reality versus the American dream is such that this individual is put in a place where they can simply not get out of their environment. Whether an individual or their family is from here in the United States or an individual is coming from abroad, debt bondage is a tactic used by traffickers to place a debt over an individual's head or even an individual's family's head. They are unable to move past this current chapter of their lives without paying off this debt. But little do they know that debt will never be cleared. The trafficker's sole objective is to strip a victim of any identification that they may have, their gender identity, their cultural identity, their family status, their family traditions, solely to get the individual where they are at their most vulnerable state. So when debt bondage is used, it is an intimidating tactic used to subject somebody and put them in a place where they can never escape. Fear is the biggest driver in creating a barrier between that individual reporting what's happening to them and continuing to work and be in the same work environment that they were subjected to. Fear of law enforcement, fear of deportation, fear of their legal status being exploited or identified, fear of, most importantly for male survivors, of not being believed, and the fear of shame contribute to the fear of not wanting to leave their trafficking situation. There's an inherent assumption that somebody that has been victimized through labor trafficking will be able to self-identify and self-report to a law enforcement entity or a service provider. And in the way that they are expected to self-report and self-identify must be using language that may be verbatim from the Trafficking Victims Protection Act. And we know that for many individuals that are victimized, it may be difficult to articulate the types of experiences that they have been a part of that may directly relate to the TVPA. But being able to create an environment where the burden is shifted back on the service providers, the burden is shifted back on law enforcement to create an environment of trust will make it more useful for those that are at risk or that have already been victimized to then be able to share the type of victimization or the type of work environment that they have been a part of. Anyone can be a victim of labor trafficking. When we take a step back and ask ourselves how this is a human issue, how are people subjected to forced labor, we can then revisit the question of who is actually being targeted, where are they being targeted, and how they're being targeted. When there is more of an emphasis by the media to portray those questions and answer those questions, it gets us closer to understand who the traffickers are. The media can be a great asset to this anti-trafficking movement if more attention is focused on making labor trafficking a human issue, where the solutions are understanding how traffickers are finding ways to exploit workers for a new opportunity. My first piece of advice that I would give to somebody who is in a work situation that they deem or they view as hostile is to first ask them, is my employer putting me in a position where I feel threatened, or putting me in a position where if I speak out about my job outside of work or even during work, I may be subjected to retaliation, or my supervisor is threatening law enforcement against me? Am I able to ask for help within my job? Am I able to ask for help outside of my job without being retaliated against? If the answer to both of those questions is no, my piece of advice at that time is to find someone that you're able to trust outside of your work environment.
So Suleiman is one of our lived experience experts on our consultant network, but he's also the chair of the U.S. Advisory Council on Human Trafficking. And so, yeah, this 12-part series of videos that we use, they're meant to accompany our trainings. They're not available to the public, but Suleiman's is on our website because he just did such a great job of being able to describe those acts and describe more about really what human trafficking victimization is like without bringing his own personal story into the mix. So we were able to make that one public. But the other 11 are private, and we pretty much just use them for our trainings. But they are very helpful in really helping update people on what human trafficking victimization is like. And of course, a variety of different awareness materials on our website. Those are a couple. All of our materials are available to the general public to be able to download, order in bulk in a variety of different languages. We have materials in 38 different languages and growing. One of our new sort of resources, these indicator cards that for industry specific, whether it's indicators in agricultural, in hospitality, in the maritime industry, we've been able to put these on our website for the general public to download directly from there. That is a QR code. If you're interested in seeing what they look like or want to check them out right now, please feel free to scan that QR code. If technology did its job today, that QR code should be working. And then Carter's story. I want to share this new sort of video that we've created with the help of the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children and through a variety of different conversations with forensic interviewers and special agents in the field. They identified that there's a gap in resources geared towards young people playing video games. They said that there was a lot of victimization that is going unnoticed, that people are being groomed, that people are meeting just bad actors online in non-traditional spaces like video games now. So we created this 2-part series called Carter's Story that follows a young man playing video games and what ends up happening. So this is going to be the second part of that video series. And the first part is available on our website, and I hope you go see it. So let me go ahead and start sharing just this part 2. This is available on our website. You could download this directly from there, share it with your audiences, include it in your trainings. Here it goes.
But hey, at least I'm good at racing games, right?
Yep.
Hey, I know you've been online a lot with your new squad buddy. You just need to be careful. There's no fast way to build up trust. There are dangerous people online who are really good at seeming trustworthy. They might act like a close friend or try to win you over with gifts. They're friendly as long as it helps them dig for personal info, like your schedule, where you live, and go to school. From there, things can get really scary.
Yeah. Can you stop here, please?
Oh, sure. Hey, have a good day.
Truth is, with these pics, I own you. And I know where you live.
Please, stop! Why are you doing this?
Relax. Hey, you do me a little favor tonight and everything will be fine. I need you to meet my friend at the Westview Mall parking lot, south side. Do what he says, and if you make him happy, I won't blast your pics. Got it?
What? I gotta go to the mall? Tonight?
No questions. You said your parents let you do whatever, so I don't see the problem. Get walking, kid. You're on the clock.
Mom? I don't know what to do. Carter? Hey, what do you mean?
Hey, son.
Honey, how could it get this far? Yes, we're upset, but not with you, Carter. It's his fault, not yours. We read about how often this stuff happens, but I never imagined that. We made the mistake of not doing more to be there for you. But you know what? That changes right now.
I'll call the number from that article. Make sure we save the chat log to show the authorities too, okay?
I'm so sorry, Carter. We'll all get through this together. But right now, I need you to talk to me.
Causing someone under the age of 18 to engage in a commercial sex act, regardless of using force, fraud, or coercion, is human trafficking under U.S. law. If you suspect a child is being exploited, call or text the National Human Trafficking Hotline or submit a report to the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children Cyber Tip Line. Call local law enforcement if someone is in immediate danger.
All right.
But hey,
So yes, I want to. Yes, please, Robin.
Okay, that was great too. These are amazing materials, and people are asking about how to get them. And I think one of the things was that QR code for the Carter story 1 and 2 went by a little fast, maybe. If you want to put that QR code back for a sec, people can grab it from there. That's great. Okay, Victor. Victor was just asking me about that. And then someone was saying, okay, Stefan got the numbers. Somebody was asking about the culture card. Were those the little cards? I'm wondering if Stephanie was asking about, I think Stephanie, somebody was asking, yes, about the culture card be available. If you are referring to those, it looks like Diego posted that series of little cards based on
Yeah.
industry questions. So, so I think Stephanie, you got that answer. And then real quick, Diego, somebody asked about the cost of these campaigns and where it comes from and all of that jazz. So if you want to talk about that, or you can, that would be great.
Yeah, so the Blue campaign has actually been codified in the Congress. So we are earmarked funds by Congress year by year. So with those funds, we're able to do paid media. We're able to do targeting with advertisements. We're able to do radio advertisements. We're able to pay for those billboards, both out of home and digital paid media. So yes, so we were codified in the Congress in 2019. And we are earmarked funds by them. Yeah, great question. So yes, so we did an entire photo shoot geared towards Native communities and indigenous communities in order to be able to, the federal government sometimes is a little behind on the sort of imaging that they're using. So we did this project for every agency, for every department to be able to use culturally sensitive images when they are, doing outreach or doing trainings with Native communities. And these are just some of those snapshots. If you're familiar with Washington, D.C., we actually did this filming in Rock Creek Park. All right, and finally, this is one of our newer resources. If you have connections, if you work in casinos and tribal casinos, and more specific, we did an entire toolkit with the National Indian Gaming Commission to train all staff, from security to valet parking to people that are working the slot machines, things like that, on human trafficking prevention and awareness within casinos. All right. And I will drop links. I want to be respectful of my colleague Clancy. So Clancy, I'm going to go ahead and start sharing your screen, and I will be adding links throughout in the chat about where you could find this information. But that's our website. That is our email address. And if you don't follow us on social media, that is at DHS Blue Campaign on X, Instagram, and Facebook. Clancy, take it away.
Sure thing. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Special Agent Clancy Dunnigan. As you can see on the screen, I'm currently a National Program Manager at the in the Victim Protection Unit at the Center for Countering Human Trafficking. As Robin said, I did start my career in Miami, and on the chat, I see Vic Williams talking, who I assume is the Vic Williams there he is, I worked with in Miami. I've been on this job since 2008, and I'm just trying to grow up to be as good as Vic. So you guys have a great resource right there in the panelist. You should definitely reach out to him. So I am. One other important connection is I did start my career in Miami and Fort Lauderdale. I did 5 years before coming to Center for Countering Human Trafficking with HSI Indianapolis and Indiana. But I got my degrees from Florida A&M, so Rattler Strike, and everyone that I saw from FSU, we're still friends. So Diego, could we go to the next slide, please? All right, so this is just disclaimer. Materials presented today are for informational purposes only and are not legal advice. The information disseminated today and statements made by CCHT personnel are intended solely, go Knowles, are intended solely for the purpose of providing public outreach to stakeholders about issues of mutual interest. It is not intended to, does not, and may not be relied upon to create any right or benefit. I got the comments going crazy. And also, as far as my presentation that we got here today, and that's fine, Diego, you can go to the next slide. As far as my presentation we got going on here today, another part of my history, I did 20 years in the military. I was a drill sergeant in the Army. I've done very strict by the book training, and I refuse to ever do it again. So guys, feel free to put questions in. If you want any explanations, any examples of anything that to maybe drive anything home, feel free to interrupt. I don't mind. We can be as interactive as possible with all your microphones turned off. So while we're here to discuss continued presence, and we'll get into what continued presence is for those of you that may not know. I know that most of you here have been involved in the fight against human trafficking for a while, but I figure we might have some newbies. So I want to start off with, I want to start off in an effort to not make anybody feel like they don't know what we're talking about or feeling left behind, with a little bit of the basics about CCHT, the Center for Countering Human Trafficking. We started in October 2020. DHS launched the Center for Countering Human Trafficking, the first unified intercomponent coordination center, a lot of words there, for countering human trafficking, including the importation of goods produced from forced labor or with forced labor. That's an important part that falls out of the conversation a lot. We are interested in helping victims here, but also we're interested in not financially supporting victims abroad. A big part of that, or a big link to that, when it comes to law enforcement, that I know Vic has been involved in investigations, plenty of investigations into human trafficking. So, from an undercover capacity, we've looked into the idea of setting up some undercover operations where we might be able to rescue some victims from some forced sex labor. And what we came to with legal was that they didn't want us to do it for fear that we may inadvertently create an environment where a trafficker may go out and kidnap someone specifically to sell to us, which would be us rescuing. And I think that's an important point to make. I don't know if we have any ex-military on here. Being ex-military, I know that every special forces operator that's retired and collecting his checks and looking for something to do and needs a mission in life loves the idea of helping victims. So for those of you who are there to try to help victims who are I saw a lot of chatter about the Super Bowl outreach and the people talking about doing that kind of stuff around other sporting events. And it is very true that when large sporting events come to town, prostitution comes to town. And we do some online scraping, we call it, of standard known prostitution sites on the internet to see if we can find any victims. So we are trying to do something. My information's right at the end there, bud. I've got my email at the end. But we do those operations around those events. But if you guys, I know there are a lot of people, you guys are out there working in the field and doing your best to rescue people. And we just ask that you keep that in mind. Be really discerning in the way you operate to make sure that we don't create a situation where someone may be trafficked that wouldn't have otherwise been trafficked. So, sorry, getting back to that. The breadth of the DHS counter-trafficking efforts includes the investigations, enforcement and intelligence, victim protection and assistance, identification and screening, and training, outreach, and engagement. The CCHT better equips and positions DHS to accomplish and improve every aspect of its counter-trafficking efforts, especially with people like Diego at the Blue Campaign. It's been really great for our outreach. We recognize that while we do technically fall under ICE because we are DHS, we are not enforcement and removal operations. We are not trying to deport everyone that we come across, which is why you'll see that a lot of the presentation here in this presentation, we'll touch on it, but if we were to come out and give you guys a more in-depth presentation, we focus on victim-centric. We are victim-centric. We are victim-centric. Historically, the police have really messed up, going out to do prostitution operations and arresting every sex worker and really scarring some victims. So we lean heavy in the other direction. So Diego, could you please go to the next slide? Okay, so this is a...
I need to
Yes,
stop. I need to stop you, Clancy, because what you just said is so important for people to understand, because we see this in communities a lot. We see these prostitution stings, and we see all of the, hoopla about human trafficking, and exactly that happens. So I just wanted to highlight for everybody the fact that you've got somebody so experienced as Clancy saying this and offering resources to help counter that activity that perhaps well-intentioned, right? But to really do it right. So thank you for saying that. I just wanted to give you a shout out there.
Yes, ma'am. And actually, one more point I want to make is, to give you guys shout outs. I understand that law enforcement, NGOs, it can get contentious sometimes, and we all know that it shouldn't, but it still does. But early in my career, my first foray into anything human trafficking was actually going to a presentation that Vic Williams gave, and I was the guy that sat and hit the next button for the next slide when Vic was teaching. So at that event, I met an NGO, and this is early in my career. I learned the importance of NGOs and working together with NGOs. And this is a horrific story. I've told it dozens of times because I think it's a really important thing for people to hear. I met an NGO, and she worked in Miami, and her entire job was to go out and make sure that sex workers were okay. She wasn't there to talk them out of the life. She wasn't there to do anything that could make their pimp or trafficker feel, hopefully pimp and not trafficker, feel threatened, so that she was allowed to come out to see if they need medication, do they need food, do they need rehab. And she told me this horrible story, and it really put into perspective what we in law enforcement are good for and what we are absolutely not the people for. She had a call that I believe it was a third grade teacher went to a bachelor party at a gentleman's club, and while he was at the bachelor party at the gentleman's club, one of his students came on stage, and it was his current student. And so he called the police. The police showed up. Turns out that the girl's stepdad had gotten her a fake ID and was making her work there. He was also trafficking her. But the law enforcement officers there had the foresight to know that. I mean, I know that I'm a 200-pound, tattooed Army vet with this accent. I'm not the person that most victims want to talk to, and I recognize that. So they waited for this woman to show up, and when she showed up, they went to the little girl's belongings, and she had a teddy bear in her locker. So everyone that worked at that club knew that was a child, and it's just a horrific thing. But it highlights the importance of NGOs and law enforcement working with NGOs, because no one wants to talk to us, not in the beginning, especially not with the lies that they've been told by their traffickers. So while today, the specific reason that I'm here is to focus on the victim protection portion of our mission at CCHT, because there's really no better example of our victim-centered approach to me than the CP mission, because it allows these people who've been victimized, who've been told the things that Diego talked about, or that Suleiman in the video that Diego showed talked about, being told you can't do anything for yourself, no one can take care of you, you can't make any money, you're going to be deported, we'll call ICE on you, and it allows them to know that with continued presence, those things don't apply to them anymore, and we'll get into those details a little bit as well. But So to start off, I want to get a little bit into, and Diego, if we can go to the next slide. I want to start off with some basics on human trafficking, just in case there are any newbies here, or also because I know that some NGO organizations focus on the victims, and I know that it can be troubling that what seems like human trafficking, what may be human trafficking, may not be human trafficking, or it's just not at the point where we can prove human trafficking. Because in law enforcement, we all know that it's not what you know, it's what you can prove. That's an important point. And before we move forward with certain protections in that we offer, it's an important point to make sure that we have all of the facts and that those facts meet the legal guidelines. Because what we don't want to do is get it gummed up with applications or examples that may turn out to not be human trafficking, or not have met the guidelines of proof yet, because we don't want to give a demagoguing pundit or politician an excuse to say, see, all these applications have been denied. That shows that it's not a big deal. It's not actually as big a problem as we think. We don't want to give them that opportunity. So we want to make sure that we've gotten it to the point where it needs to be and that it does meet the guidelines first. So to that end, a lot of people get human trafficking and human smuggling confused. We all know that if you sell narcotics, you're trafficking in narcotics. We all know that if you sell guns, you're trafficking in arms. But selling people doesn't necessarily equate to human trafficking, and human trafficking doesn't necessarily equate to selling people. So in this infographic, we see the difference. Human trafficking is involuntary, human smuggling is voluntary. So to break this down in the beginning here, to make it easier to understand, think of human trafficking as Uber, right? You need a ride, you call Uber. Uber's going to get you there. You want to come across the border, you're going to call a coyote. Now, hopefully, most coyotes are operating as Uber. They're going to get you there. So you're there voluntarily. That's the difference between trafficking and smuggling. In a nutshell, that's the big difference, is voluntarily. You're there voluntarily. You're riding in that Uber. Now, Ted Bundy had a Volkswagen, and he shoved victims in the trunk. Now, Ted Bundy could be driving Uber with that Volkswagen, but those people in the back, they're not there voluntarily. It's a different situation. So on a basic level, starting off, we can say, is it Uber or is it Ted Bundy with somebody in the trunk? So human trafficking is involuntary. So human smuggling is voluntary, but to a lot of people on a basic level, they look like the same thing. Human trafficking is a crime against a person, and human smuggling is a crime against the state. It's just breaking an administrative law, essentially. It's the only crime is the immigration law. The only victim is the immigration law. Human smuggling is transportation-based, like Uber. Human trafficking is exploitation-based. Now, that's where we'll stop comparing it to Uber, because exploitation can take several forms that can be varying levels of horrifying. So exploitation, generally, a human trafficker will be exploiting people for their own benefit, for the trafficker's benefit. So there are some things that we'll come to in a bit that may seem like human trafficking, but aren't human trafficking. They're definitely crimes, but they're not human trafficking. Now, human smuggling requires a border crossing, and it's foreign nationals, because you're not going to have to smuggle a U.S. citizen into the United States, I guess, unless they're on the lam. But human trafficking doesn't require a border crossing, and it doesn't have to be foreign nationals. Citizens can be trafficked. Citizens can be sex trafficked. We all understand that concept. Citizens can be labor trafficked. I grew up in Appalachia in the 70s, and some of our parents made us work jobs when we were young. And today that might actually be considered human trafficking, but it might not. But we can take that to more criminal ends and see how U.S. citizens could be trafficked, labor trafficked, and sex trafficked. The no border crossing is, and Robin did touch on that with my investigative history. I've worked cases that involved minors being prostituted. Now, to varying degrees, those minors were there of their own volition, but a 14-year-old isn't old enough to make a decision. So even if they are there of their own volition, they're not old enough to make that decision. They're not old enough to get a tattoo. They're not old enough to choose to work for a pimp. But really, the big point when it comes to human trafficking, unless it's a minor when it comes to sex work, there has to be force, fraud, and coercion. In smuggling, strict smuggling, there's no force, fraud, or coercion. There's a service. It's Uber. In trafficking, they have to be forcing the person to engage in labor or sex trafficking, labor or sex work. They have to have fraudulently gotten them involved in that labor or sex work, or they have to there has to be force, fraud, or coercion. They have to be coercing them. And coercion can be all kinds of things. In the video, in the animated video, that's a horrible one. That sex extortion is a big thing now, where they get those children to send them pictures, and then they coerce them into sex work or sending money, because if they don't, they're going to send they threaten to send those pictures out to their family and their friends. Now, there's no physical force involved there, but it's still force. It's coercive force. And then you see the note at the bottom: human smuggling situations can turn into human trafficking. Human smuggling may involve violence or exploitation, but the situation may not rise to the level of human trafficking. So as far as how human smuggling may involve violence or exploitation, realistically, those coyotes work for the cartels, and they're just not friendly people. So if you're not keeping up, they'll beat you so you keep up. That's not necessarily going to be human trafficking. That could be all kinds of other crimes, but it's not necessarily going to be human trafficking. But human smuggling turning into human trafficking, a standard is a big way they do it is through the debt bondage, which you saw the video of Suleiman talking about, where they'll bring people over. They'll tell them it's going to cost you $5,000 to come across the border. And then once they give them to a stash house on the American side of the border, they say, well, we want another $5,000 and you owe us, so you're not going anywhere. And then it becomes human trafficking. It becomes they're not allowed to move. They're not allowed to leave. They're forced to work off the crime. The debt bondage is how that human smuggling can turn into human trafficking, and why human smuggling organizations and human trafficking organizations have a lot of crossover, and often they're the same organization. You're just lucky if you don't end up getting trafficked when coming across with them. Now, a big reason why this is an important distinction to understand for most of you here is that if your victims are applying for the classification of continued presence, we don't deny applications for continued presence often. We do our best to not deny the applications for continued presence, to the point that we will call and email. We send deficiencies to be corrected, to try to get these applications where they need to be to then be submitted to Citizenship and Immigration Services in order to be approved for continued presence. However, if the situation that your victim is involved in doesn't meet those guidelines, if it actually is human smuggling, if it actually is something else that is a crime but may not meet human trafficking guidelines, then we would have to deny it and hopefully give you some other guidance on where to go or what to look into. And as far as what couldn't be, Diego, if you could give me the next slide. So prostitution is not necessarily human trafficking. Again, drug trafficking, arms trafficking, and human trafficking, they don't line up. It gets confusing. But prostitution, sometimes people are victims of their circumstances. Somebody gets addicted to narcotics and they're prostituting so that they can afford their narcotics. Now, that could easily slide into human trafficking if their pimp is also their drug dealer and refuses to give them their narcotics, their medicine. If they don't work, then that can move into human trafficking. Harsh working conditions is not necessarily going to be human trafficking, depending on the situation. It could be a labor violation, in which case we call Department of Labor. Hostage for ransom, that's kidnapping, that we call the local police or the FBI. Mail order brides or forced marriage, while it sounds sketchy and no one should participate, the mail order brides can turn into abuse and exploitation. There was a story long ago of a woman that came over and ended up being required to be or forced to be a servant, sleeping on a dog bed. Awful treatment. Illegal adoption, also a horrible thing. Those children are often being kidnapped from their parents or purchased from their parents in other countries. Organ trafficking is a different charge that you can look for. It won't necessarily be human trafficking. Distribution and possession of child sexual abuse materials, which is CSAM is what we call it, or child porn is what you may have heard. If there are any investigators on this on this class, then definitely look into that. There's a lot of that involved in the human trafficking, and a lot of the CSAM investigations can turn into human trafficking investigations. So can we get the next slide there? Okay. So human trafficking investigations, the most challenging element of human trafficking investigations is enforcement and identifying victims. I know we're running short on time, so I'll just summarize all this. You guys need to work with your local HSI victim assistance program specialists, which is our VAPS, we call it our VAPS program with HSI. They are the people that can help you all facilitate getting your victims their continued presence. Now, what is continued presence? Here you see the information of the laws that govern continued presence. It assists trafficking victims. It's good for up to 2 years, is renewable, includes a work permit, leads to refugee benefits and services. And it benefits victims and law enforcement in that it supports victim-centered approach, alleviates fear of removal, restores self-sufficiency, victim witness is more stable, and victim witness is available to seek justice. Yes, Robin.
I think that might be the next slide. Okay, there we go. Okay.
Oh, sorry. So here we see what is continued presence. Now, continued presence could be described as an immigration benefit, but it's not an immigration benefit because it's not an immigration status. It's a protection from deportation. It allows them the ability to get a work permit, a work authorization card. While they're on continued presence, you can be working towards getting them a U visa, T visa, other immigration benefits or relief that they might need. So that this is a very narrow window for immigration relief, temporary immigration relief. And in order to qualify for it, the victim has to be engaged in a court proceeding. Now that you can see at the top, that can be a criminal investigation. It can be a civil action. But they have to be actively participating in a court proceeding. It's if they're a victim that doesn't want to participate, if they're a victim that falls out of participation, then they can lose their continued presence. So it is specifically the narrow window for victims who are participating in a court proceeding. And if I could get the next slide, please. There we go. So who is this for? Anybody that's a victim of sex trafficking or forced labor. Anybody who may be a potential witness or has filed a federal civil action. So the witness, the victim who can give us information that will help us put away their traffickers. The civil action, and that is maybe it's after the trafficker has been convicted. Maybe like we talked about earlier, maybe there isn't enough evidence to convict them. We know it, but we can't prove it. But there might be enough for civil action because civil court has a lower standard of proof. So if they're suing for financial, suing somebody for financial payback, essentially, just like we do in court here. So I see victim says, does the victim have to participate in the investigation? Yes, the victim has to make themselves available to the investigator. They do. They are a potential witness. Now, there are, and we'll get to this in just a moment, but there doesn't have to be an active court case. It could be the investigation leading up to a court case, but they have to be involved. They have to be actively involved in the movement towards a court case of some kind. Okay, and then let's go to the next slide. Sorry, I'm just trying to keep us on our time crunch. So these are the things that our victim-centered approach and what we use continued presence for. It authorizes them to receive protection from removal. Now, they don't have an immigration status, but they have I see that question, Stefan. I'll get to you in just 1 second. So they don't have an immigration status, but they have protection from removal. They won't be deported while they're working on immigration status. And I understand that can get confusing. And if you'd like an in-depth training, we are happy to come out and give you guys a more in-depth training on all of this, on CCHT, on human trafficking specifically, or continued presence. But we also get them an authorization for employment so they can have a job and not be deported. They can also be eligible for federal benefits, and that kills most of what their trafficker told them to keep them under their thumb. So if we can go to the next slide, and we won't get into the weeds in this one. This is just to show you tips on when and for whom to apply. Pretty much when, you see timing. If you want to know when, as soon as possible. If there's an investigation, if there's a civil action coming, if you're an attorney, a civil attorney looking to or organizing your case for a civil action, apply. Get it going as soon as possible. It allows them to have their fears alleviated. And so we want you to get to us as soon as humanly possible. And you can request for everyone that's an identified victim. Now, what we don't want, again, like I said earlier, is just throwing everything against the wall and seeing what sticks. We need you to make sure that they are likely to have been an actual victim. But if you believe that they are likely to have been an actual victim, apply early and apply for everyone. So next slide, please. Oh, sorry, we're skipping that one. That one was for law enforcement. So application for civil actions, and we won't get into the weeds on this one either, but a criminal investigation does not need to be initiated or underway when continued presence is requested in support of civil actions. There might not, like we said, there might not be a criminal investigation to be had for various reasons, but there could be a civil one. So you can apply for continued presence. And you see there a copy of the file of the filed complaint, a one-page description of the litigation, and an explanation of how the individual meets the definition of a victim of severe form of human trafficking in persons, focusing on the elements of force, fraud, and coercion. Now, you want to, just like we were all taught in grade school, keep it long enough to cover the topic, but short enough to keep it interesting. We don't need the entire 16-page affidavit. We need a paragraph, maybe two, explaining how they meet force, fraud, and coercion. So let's go to the next slide, please. So this is just kind of shows you the summary of how the process works. You guys in the field identify potential victims. You apply through the method that we'll look at on the next slide, and then we review it. We at CCHT review your application. We confirm that it's all filled out correctly, that it's eligible, and then we approve it to then move on to CIS, Citizenship and Immigration Services, who will then adjudicate the CP. And then on the next slide, please. Nope, that is not, there it is. Let's click through until we get, click probably one more. There you go. So if you're a civil attorney, you will reach out to an HSI, Victim Assistance Program Specialist, or a VAPS, sometimes called a VAP or a VAS, depending on how long the person's been with the agency. but you'd reach out with them, who would then get with one of us in the field, an HSI special agent. If you look at the bottom, if you're a state, tribal, territorial, or local law enforcement officer, you can reach out straight to us and we'll take care of it. Or you can go to one of your other federal partners if you're on a task force with a federal partner. If you're in an area where HSI doesn't have a big footprint for some reason, or if you are on a narcotics task force and your warrant for a meth lab turned up trafficking victims, you can go through DEA, as long as it has to be a federal law enforcement officer. If it's not HSI, they'll go through their headquarters point of contact, who will then submit to us. The reason we need a law enforcement officer involved at as early as possible at all stages is because in order for someone to be a victim, there has to be a victimizer, and there has to be force. Now, hopefully, there's just been fraud, because that's the least emotionally scarring, I would think. But there's likely going to have been some force or coercion. So we want to make sure we have somebody who is empowered to protect, involved in the process as early as possible. Next slide, please. So again, we see we don't deny very often. I've been here for a couple months. I haven't seen a denial. I haven't heard anyone talk about a denial. What I hear us talk about is, what can we do to keep this from needing to be denied? One big one is that if for some reason the deficiencies aren't addressed timely, it may require a denial. But we will stay in touch and beat everybody up with emails to try to keep that from having to happen. Yes, ma'am.
You may have this in your slides, but just in light of time, I thought I could give you a couple of questions that you might be able to answer quickly as you move through. Okay, one is, can there be a civil case without a criminal case to get continued presence?
Absolutely.
Exactly. And how does, someone asked, how does this differ from applying for interim assistance through the Shepherd system?
So we enter this into the Shepherd system. And honestly, I don't want to give bad information on that. We have somebody we have one person right now at CCHT that does a lot of the entering into the Shepherd system. We're having some crossover issues with getting everybody approved right now. But it's similar, and we work hand in hand with the Shepherd system.
Okay,
CP is
great.
probably faster, I would think, to get all this taken care of. We can get it turned around in a couple weeks, 3 weeks. So that may be faster than the Shepherd system, but as far as any more details beyond that, I don't want to give bad information.
Very good, very good. And one question I have is to how you get your local law enforcement on the same page with you to help with the information that would get to you.
Local law enforcement, hopefully they'd be interested in working a human trafficking angle. Now, a lot of times they just don't understand human trafficking. And if local law enforcement isn't helping, reach out to HSI, reach out to FBI if they're local. If HSI doesn't have, FBI has a huge footprint. But if you think you have a good one and somebody's not listening, go elsewhere, go over their head. It'll make it to us. HSI, if you go to HSI, especially if it's foreign nationals, you'd need to go to HSI. And we have people in pretty much every office like Vic, that specialize in human trafficking. They're the people, and they will absolutely look into it and get you what you need.
Great, thank you.
Sure.
And we've got about 2 minutes left, everybody.
Okay, and now I'll show you one here at the bottom. Even if you do get CP for a victim, it can be revoked. Now, it can be revoked if they leave the country without advance parole. What that means is without advanced permission to leave the country. The idea behind that being that the reason they need continued presence is because they're worried about their safety here in the country. Once they leave the country, they're arguably removed from the threat. So we want to make sure that we get that taken care of ahead of time. Don't let them leave the country without going through immigration to get that taken care of. If they commit a crime, obviously they're probably going to end up in jail instead of in continued presence. If they've absconded, like we said, they need to be participating. They need to be participating, moving towards a court case. But if they just disappeared, don't answer calls, they moved out of their apartment, we're going to have to revoke. If they're no longer identified as a victim, now that's happened, and I know it was a case that I believe Vic worked on with us, where we had a bunch of victims down in Miami, and two of the victims were a mother and daughter. And during the course of investigation, they figured out that the daughter was the victim. The mother was actually pimping her own daughter. So we went and got her from the safe house and took her to the jail. Obviously, she would lose all benefits in that. If granted based on a civil action, if failed to exercise due diligence in pursuing the civil action or becomes inadmissible, that's saying make sure that if you're doing this pursuant to civil action, make sure that all your I's are dotted, your T's are crossed, and that everything is straight and meets the requirements. Now, someone asked me about fake adoptions. Those children are often kidnapped, and they're also bought from their parents. Now, that doesn't meet the guidelines of human trafficking here, because there's not a benefit necessarily. Now, there could be a benefit, and honestly, if you have a good U.S. attorney and a good investigator, we can nitpick and find one angle that could turn it into human trafficking, but it has to meet certain guidelines. Kidnapping, yes, all kinds of things that it could meet, but it might not meet human trafficking guidelines. So I know that can be upsetting, but just go easy on the law enforcement officer you're working with if they say it doesn't meet guidelines, and work with them to get it to meet guidelines, to find ways that it meets guidelines. So here we can see the contact for Countering Human Trafficking, CCHT, how to find a local field office, victim assistance program. If any of you are NGOs, civil attorneys, you definitely want that information. We also do quarterly law enforcement webinars for this specific CP. We do them to the public as well. We don't have one scheduled right now. Our most recent one was actually yesterday. But you can either, if you Google Center for Countering Human Trafficking, the link to our site is the first thing that comes up. We post those there. You also see my email at the bottom. You can email me if you want to be added to a list. Now, realistically, the most likely, the best way to guarantee it is to check the website, because I'm a government worker and you know what that means. So check the website, also email me and I'll get you on a list, and hopefully I won't miss an email. But that's it. If we have any questions, I'm happy to ask. If you have any other questions, copy down my email, reach out and ask me if we don't have time. And thank you all for listening to me bark.
That sounds great. Wow, you're getting so many comments for both of you, Diego and Clancy, for all of your information. I learned a ton. I wish we could have another half an hour, but everybody, we don't. We will be posting this video online. Lots of claps and happiness coming our way with the emojis. We can officially tell you all, great presentation. Yay. Thank you, everybody. Lots of love coming, everybody. This has been a really, really important one. I'm so glad you came back, Diego, and you brought your friend Clancy here. You guys make a great team. Can we also say, there was one more question that I wanted to get to, and if you have any more, can you guys hang on for like 5 more minutes to answer a couple questions? Understanding if everyone, you need to leave. We did have a couple people with some questions, and we might as well try to knock them out before everybody has to go. So if our speakers can stay for 5, Laura, I hope that's okay with you. And I don't know that I said thank yous to you a lot, Laura. Laura at Just in Time Training. Thank you.
Absolutely great for me. So I would love to stay on.
You know, we love you. So you did so much. So somebody asked a quick question. So y'all, if you have to leave, we got it. But somebody wanted to know about what happens if the person is a juvenile. Do you want to say anything special about, Clancy, what happens in these cases of CP for juveniles?
Well, I can say from an emotional standpoint, we work a little bit harder. But as far as if they're a juvenile, it depends on the situation and their parents' knowledge and involvement. We get obviously juveniles involved in that stuff a lot. They have the access to the same benefits as everyone else, but also they have access to other benefits. A juvenile victim is immediately placed. Well, they go to a safe house while we're getting them there, but we immediately place them in foster care. in another state, someplace far away from the trafficking organization, there's excessive amounts of keeping it secret.
Great. Okay. Well, I think that's it. And I would also say too, juveniles, usually you combine forces on the ground with safe homes, with services, with your DFS or DCF. And there's a whole range of other supports that are there, just like for adults in the community. So I think that's all we have, everybody. I think that's it. Diego and Clancy, thank you, thank you, thank you. And Diego, please be in touch with all of that information about the event in January so we can make sure we post it so everybody here and on our 8,000 person list can see it. We also want to make sure we can have access to some of those materials, the story of Carter, that we have access to all that. Let me also offer to you, if you want to put anything in our local newsletter, we'd love to just drop things in there too. So if you want to help share, we will do that. Remember, this we'll have this online for you to download and watch this again at the website that I shared from Stack. And final words, Clancy and Diego.
Just like to thank everybody for coming out and for the work that you do.
Yes, thank you so much for having us back here. This is always great to be able to talk with this group, so thank you.
Thank you so much. All right, everybody. Have a great weekend. It was great to be with you again. And November 15th, we're going to talk about immigration again with Vanya Aguilar and Daniela Donoso, both here local immigration experts, and looking forward to that. So thank you, everybody. See you in November.
Thank you.
Okay. Bye-bye.